Hello, and welcome back to the My First Marathon podcast. My name's Taylor, and today I talked to a runner who's had quite the marathon journey over his last 8 years of running. From running his first marathon in Philly, completely following his own training plan, to later getting a coach and trying to qualify for Boston, and then ultimately running Boston, he's got a ton of stories along the way that I think we can all learn from. There's some great insights in this episode about pace inclusivity and making sure that running is a world for everyone. And there's honestly just a lot to cover in this episode, so we'll go ahead and jump right in. Please welcome Corey. Corey, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. How's your weekend going so far?
It's going well. I got in a long run this morning, and I feel like I'm feeling it right now because the temperatures they're rising. They're getting pretty high
For
up
sure.
there.
Yeah,
I won't
I felt that
complain
this
about
morning.
it, but
Where are you located? Are you in the humidity part of the country, or where are you at?
I'm closer to Philly, so
Gotcha.
we're getting the brunt of it. I feel like so. It's one of those scenarios where we just have to deal with it and just see what happens.
Yeah, take it day
It's
by
heat
day.
acclimation. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, be a little kinder to ourselves on our pace, maybe a little bit, but
Exactly.
definitely an
Yeah.
adjustment
Yeah.
this time of year. But cool. Well, thank you again for coming on the podcast. I'm really excited to break down the best we can, honestly, the last 25 years you've had of running and all of your marathon experiences.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
just kind of starting from the beginning though, how'd you get involved in the running world originally?
Wow, that actually, it started back when I was in, I want to say middle school. My older sister, she asked me, she's like, "Hey, do you like want to run?" And I'm like, "No one wants to run for fun, like ever."
Sure.
What ended up happening was I joined a local, like it was like the school like run club. It was like after school on like Tuesdays and Thursdays. I think it was Tuesdays and Thursdays after school. And I just kind of fell in love with it. I was just like, oh, I just get to run just kind of like around like the school area. So I was like, that's kind of fun, whatever. Give me something to do. I was bored. And then I got into high school and there was a cross country team. And I was like, oh, cross country, that's like running like every day. I was like, you just do a 5K, like that's fine. And I found out very quickly that I was not in as much shape as I thought I was.
Sure.
The 5K is something that I feel like I think I have more experience in the 5K, like racing a 5K than any other race. Because of high school, we raced like it was like Tuesdays and Saturdays or Thursdays and Saturdays. So we always constantly did that. And then the miles kind of slowly built up from there. But after that, I kind of stepped back a little bit from running, like when I was in college and everything. And then when I got a job, I stepped back a little bit, but I was still kind of doing it like every once in a while. But then after college and after like having a full-time job at that specific time period, I feel like I like lost my way a little bit. And my wife and I, we decided like we wanted to kind of go like the plant-based route. And we started losing weight at the same time period. It was just like a byproduct of that.
Sure. Yeah.
And I was training for my first marathon at the same time period. That was 2014. So I think I started all of that like in 2013 or so to build up to 2014. So that was quite the experience. So it's kind of like one of those like wild rides that you don't really expect to be on like ever.
Yeah.
And I'm glad I did. I mean, like I said, like if my sister didn't actually tell me like, hey, like you should try this out, I probably would not have been running at all. So there's that.
That's so cool. Yeah, that's cool how you just kind of fall into it. I feel like a lot of runners, everybody's story, how they get into it's a little bit different, but I think what everybody has in common is it's always just something a little random.
Right.
That helps you kind of get into this world. Was your sister a runner before? Like, was she doing races or anything like that, or just was running for fun?
I feel like she was just kind of running for fun. She ran in college. She went to rowing, and she did that quite a bit. And I don't know anything else other. She used to play lacrosse a lot. And I don't know if she did volleyball or field hockey, but she was athletic at the time period. So it's just like I'm one of four. So we were all pretty much like active for the most part. I played baseball for, I think it was like 14 years prior to running or 13 years prior to running. So, but I'm glad I got away from that because I'm like, don't like this anymore.
Sure. I mean, team sports are funny because I'm a team sport athlete or was a team sport athlete as well. But it's like I don't know if you feel this way too, but you're so ingrained in that, but it's not something that you can carry on for the rest of your life unless
Hmm.
you're top of the top. But
Right.
running is cool because it kind of fills that void you like from competition and keeping yourself moving and things
Yeah.
like that when
Absolutely.
you're
Yeah.
coming off team sports. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, shout out to your sister for getting you involved in running. It's obviously progressed like crazy from there.
Yeah. Yeah. It
But
really has.
yeah, how did you decide to sign up for your first marathon?
I think it was one of those things where like I kind of just wanted to prove to myself that I could do it.
Mm.
I was like, well, I never really done one before. I've done half marathons prior to that, and I was like, why not just try a full marathon? I was like, it's a bucket list thing for me. I'm like, let's just do one and see what happens. I'm like, I don't know how it's going to go, but and it ended poorly, but but yeah, I mean, like, it's one of the things I'm like, all right, well, I'll do the Philly Marathon. That was in 2014, and that one, like, I feel like I didn't really prepare very well for that. I didn't.
Mhm.
I my mileage was not what it should have been. I barely fueled at all for that race either. I learned a lot for my first one, so I feel like there's one of those things where if anybody asks me like, "Hey, what did you learn from your first marathon?" I have like a laundry list of things.
Sure, sure. Yeah, a little bit of trial and error in the beginning for sure, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's always good I mean, you have to get through that first experience to get anywhere else, so
Hmm.
it's definitely
Absolutely.
important. Well, if you remember, because I know it was some time ago, like,
Mhm.
were you following any sort of training plan to get to your first marathon, or what did that look like?
I think so. For that specific one, I feel like I was like, oh well, I just got to build up mileage. I feel like the mindset of going into, if you don't have a coach, the mindset of building up to a marathon is, oh well, every week I'm just going to add on a couple more miles so I can build up
Mhm.
to like 20 or 22, and by the time I get to race day, it's only, oh, it's only other like 4 more miles. So I kind of slowly worked towards that. I didn't add any speed workouts in, because I didn't have a coach. I was just kind of just winging it. And I didn't know you necessarily needed to fuel for this because I'm just like, well, I don't really want to go to the bathroom while I'm actually running. So I'm just like, I'm just not going to fuel at all. I'll eat before the
Sure.
race and I'll eat after the race. Like that's what I'll do. And that's a horrible idea. And also like I ran all of my training runs. They're all pretty much the same pace.
Mm,
So I don't know exactly the time I was targeting. I think I just wanted to finish.
yeah,
But I didn't have like, I didn't have a heart rate monitor. I didn't have a watch, or I had like a Timex watch. So I had nothing like too crazy at all. So I wasn't really tracking any of that stuff. I'm just like, well, I ran for like, I think 3 miles. I think I was using like Map My Run. I think that's what I was
yeah,
using. And I kind of wish I could
sure.
actually get back into that. Like, I think I might have deleted my account. I'm not sure. I wish I actually could see exactly the results from that. But I was pretty much using that for the most part, just to track mileage and everything. But yeah, every run was the same pace. And I feel like the furthest I got in that specific training block was 15 miles, like for a
Mm,
long run. I don't know about weekly mileage. That's like up in the air because I'm not quite sure. I like barely
yeah,
took any rest days. Didn't do any strength training. I really was like, well, I'm just going to see what happens.
yeah. Figure
But
it out along the way.
yeah, yeah. And then I think from what I remember, I think when I got to the 15-mile mark for that specific run, I think it was like mile like 12. Like I was having like stomach issues, and I'm just like,
Mm,
I was like, I'll go for another 3 miles, and then that's it. I was like, I feel like I can run another 11 miles. Like why not? Like that's fine.
yeah,
And then I heard about this thing called a 3-week taper. I didn't do that correctly at all. So like I said, my training plan was just something I just made up because I was just like, well, I think that this is good. Like, I don't know. Um,
yeah.
but yeah, that's a terrible idea. But I actually ended up with that race. I ended up crashing hard. I think at like mile, I think it was like mile 14 or 17. Like I hit the wall like hard.
Mm,
And it was like, that was my first marathon. Like I said, it was like crazy cold according, like for me, I think it was like 35 degrees Fahrenheit. And I'm like, this is ridiculously cold.
yeah,
Um, and then, uh, and then I crossed the finish line. And I didn't know what to do because I had no like food in my stomach at all. I had nothing in my stomach. So I really started like, I wasn't feeling well at all. And my wife now, I think we were married at the time. she actually like found me curled up in a ball like at the finish line
Oh
because I was
no.
just like I
Yeah.
didn't know like it was not good at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was definitely one of those things where I'm like, yeah, I probably should learn from this.
Sure. And is that what you were thinking? Was I'm gonna do more of these things, and now I'm gonna take that
um,
experience and kind of build from it?
no, nope. I was just like, well, I did it. Like,
Yeah,
I'm
one and
not doing
done.
another one of these again. Like, there's
Mm-hmm.
no reason for me to do this. I proved to myself I can do it. And then I signed up for I think after that one was Chicago in 2021. So about 6 years afterwards was when I did my first or my official next one.
Yeah.
And that was because it was one of the world majors. And I did that one via a charity. And I actually signed up. I signed up for the charity. I think it was like last minute. Is one of the things I'm like, I want to run this race, and I'm glad I did. But like the charity rate, like what you had to actually like pay, like not necessarily pay, but have donations for, it was like
Mhm.
double the amount. And I'm like, oh, I wish I would have known earlier, but I
Oh
clearly
wow.
didn't know this.
Sure.
So I had to ask for donations for that specific one. I hit my goal, which is good. But that race I feel like was on the complete opposite spectrum of the Philly Marathon, because the 2021 one was during a time period where well, obviously COVID, that was
Yeah.
like a big deal. But it's one of those things where like it was like no one expected the temperatures that were actually there like at all.
Mm.
I think it was crazy humid. I think we started off and it was like 70 degrees when we
Oh, that's
started, and it
awful.
was like real bad. Um, and I had a goal of, I think it was my goal was like to go sub 3 hours. And that when I had no business trying to do that in Chicago after, like,
Sure.
because I mean, I had a pretty good training block, but I think I was, well, see, I went. I wanted to try to actually qualify for the Boston Marathon. I'm like, oh,
Mm.
well, if I want to qualify for the Boston Marathon, I was like, I should train as if I'm running the Boston Marathon. So I went to the Boston Marathon website. I pulled up a training plan from there. I'm like, I follow that to a T, and
Mm.
I realized that that is not necessarily the right thing to do, because there's a lot of like cookie cutter like plans that are online to follow for like any kind of like race. It doesn't really matter what it is, but if you don't have someone guiding you, it's a little different. Um, but I just pulled one of those like one of the plans online. I'm like, I'll just do this. And I think it was like the intermediate level 3 program. I'm like, oh, like I'll just do this. I
Sure,
think
that
I
sounds
can hit
good.
these. Yeah, like I
Yeah.
don't know. But the thing is, like I said, it didn't actually sync up properly with the way like Chicago was, because clearly Boston's a little hillier than Chicago.
Right.
And the workouts I was doing, I didn't get shin splints or anything, but I ended up getting runner's knee.
Mm.
So that's one of the things. I wasn't really stretching very well. I wasn't like doing my warm ups very well. I built up my mileage too fast. I was wearing the wrong pair of shoes. I went through a lot of things for that specific race, and I ended up like, I think everything kind of went downhill at mile 14 for that one, like another one, like mile 14, because I
Yeah.
went out like way too fast. I think I went out. It, I want to say I'll have to look up the data again, but like I'm pretty sure I went out at like 6:30 pace
Wow.
for the first like 6 miles, and then I slowly went down past that like afterwards. I'm like, I had no business being there whatsoever.
Sure. Sure.
um
The common mistake is coming out
yep,
too quick.
yep, that's exactly
Yep.
what happened, and I paid for it big time. I mean, I crossed the finish line.
Yeah. But probably didn't feel as good
Yeah.
as you
Yeah,
would
I
have
mean,
loved it to.
well, I will say that I felt better after that one than I did for the Philly marathon.
Yes,
So,
yes. Little improvements for sure.
yeah, yeah.
Well,
So,
what do you feel like? I know you said you learned a lot from the first one. It sounds like you learned a lot training for your second one too, but
mhm.
what did you change besides the training plan from like your first marathon training to your second marathon training?
I think it was more just keep being consistent. I think that was one of the
Mm.
main things, because like I know a lot of people online say that consistency is key, and that's actually right. Like as long as you're doing the work on a consistent basis, it actually helps out quite a bit. Because the thing is that if you're not consistent, if you take days off like randomly, if you don't put the long runs in, you don't do the speed sessions, you don't do the other stuff. I think that's kind of one of the things that is sometimes overlooked, and it's kind of a shame, because it's like I wish I would have learned that ahead of time. Again, I was working off the wrong plan, and I didn't have a coach to tell me that. But like learning to put the miles in and doing the work and doing it properly and learning how to fuel, I think those are the things that kind of helped me from the first one to the second one. And I feel like it slowly evolved from my first marathon until my last one, or my previous one, or yeah, the one I just did. So it's like
Yeah.
They're like every marathon's different, and every marathon always challenges you in a different way. And that's one of the things I love about the race itself, because like you never really know what to expect on race day. You could do all the training in the world and it can go off like really well, but like something on race day is always going to kind of like try to derail you. It's more of a mindset of like, how do I adjust to this? How do I adapt to it? So that's one of the things that I kind of learned like along the way as well, between all the marathons I've run. So um, it's just one of those things where you think you have it, you think you know everything about it, and you really don't.
Absolutely. Yeah, race
Yeah.
day, you got to take your expectations and bring them bring
Yep.
them down a little
Yeah.
bit,
Yeah. Yeah.
so you can be a little bit more adaptable for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you said you dialed in fuel a little bit differently for your second time around. What did that look like for
Um,
training?
I think for that one, for Chicago, I think I was using, I don't know if it was like Huma gels.
Mm,
I don't remember which one I was using, but I did use gels. And I brought some water with me also, but I was using water on the course as well. And I was using Gatorade at the same time, because I think that's what it was on the course, Gatorade,
mhm.
just for electrolytes. But one of the things is that like I didn't know the right amounts I was supposed to be having. So a lot of times people were like, "Oh, well, you're supposed to have anywhere between like 30 and 60 grams of carbs per hour." I'm like, "Okay, like I don't know, this one gel is pretty good. Like it's 30. I guess I'm good with that one."
Yeah.
So I just brought like 3 or 4 gels and hoping that that was actually going to work, which in actuality I really needed to have like 6.
Mm,
So
mm.
I was like cutting it in half, which is not good. And then like not having the electrolytes in there, like a constant like electrolyte build in your system too, like that didn't work out very well either. So again, like this one I learned that I needed to fuel, but I had the wrong fueling like timing and just sources in general.
Yeah.
So
You're slowly putting the pieces
yep.
together, but still they hadn't quite dialed it in, but you're
Yep.
getting
Yep.
closer.
Yep. Yep.
um, well, cool. And then you said you kind of hit the wall around like mile 14, 15, I think you said for
Hmm.
Chicago.
Hmm.
When you are in that and you're so early on in the race, like what goes through your head? Are you saying like yeah, some people do mantras to themselves? Like what goes through your head at that point?
Yeah, I think it's more of like one of those scenarios where I really like I do get in my head like quite a bit, but it's not necessarily in a positive way. It's where it's like,
Mm,
am I gonna make it? Is this really worth it? Like, why do I keep going? Why can't I just stop and quit? But I think I've learned like one thing about myself. I've learned like over the years of like some marathon training and building up to this and everything. Like, I'm not really one of those people who actually does like give up on something very quickly. I always try to find a way around it or a way to actually get through it. And for those specific scenarios, it's like, all right, well, one step at a time. Like, just see what happens. It doesn't matter if I'm walking, doesn't matter if I'm jogging, sprinting, whatever it may be. I always try to find a way to actually do it, because the thing is, it's like, like some people are just like, oh, pain is temporary. It's like, yeah, that's great, but like, this is a different kind of pain level.
right.
But like, it's more about like having the right mindset and, like you said, like the right mantras too. So putting that all together for me was probably one of the best things, like said, like leading up to my previous marathon, which was the Boston one. So it's one of those things where I just don't know. It's hard to put into words like how you're thinking about certain things like during that specific time period. I
Yeah.
have had a lot of times where it's been like negative thoughts. Um, but again, like you just got to keep going, keep pushing. Like it's like you did all this work, and might as well just finish it out, you know. And that's one thing
Exactly.
I learned. Like I learned that maybe within the past like 2 or 3 marathons is like the marathon is really just like it's like the icing on the cake. You know what I mean? So I feel like all the training and everything is that's what the big deal is. And then when you run the marathon, you get rewarded to a certain
Absolutely.
degree. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes
Yeah.
a lot of sense. Yeah, I think a lot of people say, what is it like? The race is the celebration,
Hmm.
or something like that.
Hmm.
I think that's 100% true.
Yep.
But
Yep.
it does take a second to kind of wrap your mind around that. I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah. Yeah.
What race out of your races do you feel like you started to really like buy into that? That I really need to focus on
Ooh.
the progress side.
Um, I think it was when I actually got my first coach. Actually, well, actually, well, my coach currently. I think that she like having someone actually help me out, like just get through the process and get out of my head. I think that's what helped, and I think that was coming back for Philly Marathon again. And I did that one in it was 2022. I came back to
Mm,
Philly again because I feel like it was the right thing. I was just like, well, if I'm going to do this right, and I want to try, if I want to qualify for Boston and try to go sub 3 again, I was like, I'd rather bring it back to Philly and to see how I could do there. And And I was on track to do that. I was on track to do both, but the weather had other plans.
Mm.
That was one of the coldest marathons I've ever run. I think when I was heading to the starting line, I think the temperatures were like 17 degrees or a real feel of
Oh,
17.
jeez.
So
Yeah.
and we had like crazy wind chills and everything. So it was one of those scenarios where I had to adapt to that as well as try to hit this goal that I wanted to hit. And I'm like, I don't know
Yeah.
what's going to happen.
That's just 17 degrees is like, I mean, yeah, that's like gloves, shell. You
Yep.
need more than just
Well,
like what you can carry.
it's funny you say that because like when I was actually running that race, there were people who were wearing like a singlet and arm sleeves, and I'm like, I am freezing right now, and I
Yeah.
had like 3 layers on.
Crazy. Some people
Yeah,
are just built different, I guess, but yeah, that
yeah.
could never be me.
I mean, I guess that's kind of motivation. I guess. I mean, the faster you get done, the warmer you are. I guess.
True. That's true. Yeah, they're not in the cold as long as,
Yeah,
as some of us for sure.
yeah, yeah.
Um, well, how did you decide? Was the Philly marathon then when you went back? Was that your third marathon that you ran?
That was. Let's see here. I think that was my third one. Yeah, that would be my third one. I think. Yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And you brought on a coach for that one.
Hmm.
That's actually a question that I get pretty often from people is like, when does it make sense to bring on a coach? So how did you make that decision to kind of work with a coach the third time around?
I think it was one of those things where I kind of just wanted a different opinion.
Mm,
And I've been coached before, like in high school and whatever. But like, I think it's just it's good to have someone on the outside looking in. I tend to like when I'm doing certain things, I tend to kind of get in my head quite a bit. Like when it comes to certain track workouts, I'm just like, I don't know if I could do this. Like, I don't know, maybe I'll just slow down. But like a coach can actually help you like get through all that. They'll prescribe specific things for you, and it's all based off of what they think that your actual limitations are, which is
mm,
good because like I mean, that's how I treat my athletes. So it's one of those things where like it was nice to actually have someone actually there to see things on the outside versus like me just in my head like, oh, I probably should run 16 miles today. I don't know, like what's my weekly mileage, like I don't know,
right.
like it's a constant like guessing for me. And I just wanted to take the guesswork out of everything because it's like that's just one more thing I have to do. Just
Yeah.
like personally, I'm just like, if I could just have someone else do that for me, that'd be great. All I have to focus on is just putting in the work. And that's one of the things that's like really great with like having a coach is that partnership that you have with them, and they know you. I feel like sometimes a little bit better than you know yourself.
Sure.
And like I feel like sometimes they know that you're capable of doing things that you are not necessarily capable of doing, and you can see all that based off of all the workouts that are provided. And I feel the same way with my athletes. I feel the same way. So it's just one of those things where like if you have someone else believing in you and on your side, they can help you believe in yourself. So that's one of the things that
Yeah.
like I've gotten out of that, which is very like it's very helpful, especially when times get tough. It's very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And then
Yeah.
just the accountability side too,
Oh
just
yeah.
having somebody that, is putting this plan in front of you and I'm sure it's not at high pressure if you have the right relationship, but it's
Hmm.
like somebody that's keeping track of your runs and keeping track of your effort and things like that
Exactly.
instead of just you. So I'm
Yep.
sure that helps a lot as
Hmm.
well.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um well, cool. So having a coach that time around, you mentioned like when you had the Boston Marathon training plan for Chicago, it wasn't quite the right fit.
Yeah,
So
wasn't.
this plan was this geared towards Philly specifically?
Yeah, it definitely was because like one of the things that like it's also nice to have a coach that does their research. And I'm one of those ones also. And I think that she's run it several times, and she's run the Philly Marathon several times, and I feel like she knows it just as well as I do, at least now. Um, and like she knows like the tough portions of it. She knows when to actually push and when not to. And for the specific plan that I worked on, there were time periods where I had to do certain things at certain mileage. Like so, if I was going on like a 20-mile run at like mile like 12, I had to go find like a specific hill, or I needed to do this. Like I had that mentally like kind of like just plugged in, I guess.
Yeah.
So that when I actually knew that it was at this 12 mile, I was going to be working a little bit harder, but I knew that that kind of translated to mile like I don't know, I'm making this up, like mile 15 in Philly. You know what I mean? So it's like
Right.
one of those things
Yeah.
where like if you can kind of like work it in your favor, work the course in your favor, it actually it helps out. And if you the way you do that is through your training. So she did a really good job with that. And that also comes into play with a lot of the marathons I've done since Philly. It's helped out quite a bit.
Yeah.
Having specific ones that are geared towards the course that you're on. which is good.
Yeah. That is good. That's
Mhm,
interesting. That's actually something I haven't thought about a lot. It is like the importance of knowing a course and knowing
mhm,
when to push and when to hold off and knowing what's coming up. Because I think a lot of people, you'll look at the, the elevation changes or the map online, but that's usually about it for most people.
mhm, mhm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I think I could see how that would be super helpful to know.
Yeah.
And have comfort from somebody who's already run it too.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, that's great. How did the race end up for you for your third time around?
So for that one, so I was on this whole build where I wanted to run the Boston Marathon. That was like ever since Chicago. I'm like, this is something I want to do. And one thing I should note is I asked my coach one time. I was like, listen, I'm like, before I start, I'm like, can you get me to Boston? Can you get me to where I want to be? And she's just like, as long as you listen to what I tell you, I'll get you there. And I'm like, all right. I was like, I believe you.
Yeah.
So for that specific race, since I had like those kinds of conditions and everything, which I wasn't really training for, because you don't really because Philly marathons in the back end of November, we're training throughout the summer. So you're not really training in like cooler temperatures, really. Like you kind
Yeah.
of are, but you're kind of not, like towards the end of your training. But I ended up getting, so for my qualifying time, I needed to get sub 305 in order to get in. I ended up getting like 306 something.
Oh, brutal.
And I just missed out there. And I'm like, well, I got a PR, so that's good. I think I ended up getting like a 14-minute PR. So I'm like, all right, so at least I'm going in the right direction. So
Mhm.
I'm like, all right, like I guess I got to try again. And it's funny too, like as soon as that happened, as soon as I finished that race, I talked to my coach. I'm just like, so I'm looking at another race. I was like, I kind of need to know like what your thoughts are on the next one. Um, and we both came to agreements on the same one. And like, I'm glad we did because it was a fantastic race. It was Grandma's Marathon. That was my fourth
Oh,
race.
very timely. That
Yeah,
was
yeah.
literally today, I think, or
Yep.
yesterday.
Yes. Yeah. 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 So it was one of those ones where I've never heard of it before. My wife heard of it. My coach heard of it. She's like, "Oh, it's a bucket list race. Like everybody wants to do it." And I'm
Yeah.
like, "All right, like I guess I could try this out." Like it's in June. I've never actually trained for a race through the winter to get me to it's like a late spring, early summer race. I think for over
Mhm.
there, I don't think it's necessarily summer for them. I mean, it is, but it isn't. And I think this year, I think it sits in summer. But the year that I did it, which was in 2023, I think that one, yeah, I think it was like June 17th, June 18th. It was like right before summer started,
Yeah.
so it actually worked in my favor, I guess.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
So that was the race that you were shooting for your Boston qualifying time for was
yes,
Grandma's
yep,
Marathon.
yep,
Cool.
yep. That was that one that Grandma's Marathon is my favorite race. I've run a lot of courses, not necessarily marathon, just courses in general. And that was one of the ones that like it's the most memorable one, I think. Just because like not because of my time, it's more because it's the most beautiful course. You're running along Lake Superior.
Mm.
You get like natural air conditioning pretty much from the lake, which is really nice. And the first like I want to say the first couple miles, maybe up to mile 14, it's just quiet. Like you don't really there's like crowds along this along the course like every once in a while, but it's not like big crowds. So you're kind of just being in tune with your body and everyone around you. And it was actually the first race where I actually run where I didn't turn my headphones on until because I was wearing headphones at the time. I didn't actually turn my music on until mile 17.
Wow.
So I was just kind of like I was in it, which is really good because like I was kind of nervous at that time period because like you don't know what you're doing. I mean, like you're at a different, you're out of your element. You're nowhere near like where things are like that you know of, and like you're running with people you've never even like run with ever. Which I mean, that happens in any kind of race, but like the temperatures are ideal. The weather in general is ideal, and you have generally like downhill course from from the beginning until like mile 13. So it's just like all the conditions are right. Um, but yeah, it's just that race. It's definitely holds something special in my heart, just in general, because it's a really great course, and I would love to go back. I have other things to take care of first, but yeah, I would love to go back to that course because it's a beautiful race, and like the whole weekend in general is really nice because I think the Friday beforehand they have like this big pasta dinner, which is actually
Oh,
really
cool.
nice, and it's like in like a mess hall, which is really cool. Um, and you can kind of go up and get more pasta if you want to, like, get several plates if you want to, and it's really
Yeah.
great. Great way to actually like talk to other runners and talk to other people in general, which is kind of cool. And it makes it so that there's no like guessing what you need to eat for that night beforehand. It's like it's just carbs, like simple carbs, nothing
Yeah.
crazy. But yeah, I mean, like that was one of the first times. It's also one of the first races I've done that was a point to point race.
I was gonna
Everything
ask
else I've
that.
done,
Yeah.
yeah, like all the other ones I've done, like well, prior to that, were all like loops or like they kind of going all over the place. But yeah, I mean, like just doing that in general, I think that like I don't think I've run the Boston Marathon and I still feel like Grandma's Marathon is my favorite marathon. So
Yeah. That's great. I've heard that a lot from a lot of people that
Mhm,
Grandma's Marathon is just incredible. You have to do
mhm,
it at least once. I
mhm.
didn't know about the
Yep.
pasta dinner. That just adds to the experience, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, being able to connect with other runners beforehand, like especially if it's your first marathon or you're just a little bit nervous, I'm sure like being around a crowd of like-minded people
Mhm.
ahead of time is super helpful.
Yeah,
Maybe take some of the
absolutely.
nerves off.
Yeah.
Um,
One thing I did
but
learn from that one is that like you don't really it's not good to actually trust the pacers that are on there because
mm,
I was trying to like I was trying to stay with the 3 hour pace group, but they were going way ahead of the actual pace that we should have been going on.
gotcha.
And like one of the things that like if I could tell anybody about like running a marathon, if you want to stick with a pacing group, is just like don't run with a pace group.
Really?
Because the thing is that like they what their job is it's supposed to run a specific time every mile. Like you're supposed to hit it every time so people know what to get. And I remember one of the guys that was actually running with one of the pacers. He's just like, well, you know, we're coming in a little hot, but you know what? That's okay. We'll get there a little faster. I'm like, you don't do that. Like, that's not a good idea.
Yeah, that's not the point here.
Yeah,
You're supposed to be
yeah.
consistent.
But yeah, that's you know that's the one. Like, I'm not saying a downside, but it's just one of those things where it can happen in
Yeah,
any race. So it's not
totally.
necessary for that specific one. So
I was actually just talking to somebody else. Her episode's going to come out pretty soon, but she said something really similar where hers was like she was ahead of the pacer by a little bit,
mhm.
and she heard somebody say behind her, or heard the pacer say behind her, like, "Oh, we're a little bit off pace. We're going a little slower than normal." And she was thinking, as long as I stay in front of this pacer, I'm going to be good. And her hears that behind her, like, "Oh, we're a little off. We're going a little slow today." And she's like, "What? Like this is what I'm trying to follow here."
Yeah, yeah.
So I think that's a great point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you got to run your own race. That's pretty much what it is. I mean, like, it's nice to actually have a pacer there to at least guide you, but running your own race is definitely something that like you should be doing, unless you have someone that's specifically pacing you, that's geared to you. That I mean, it could be one person, could be two people, but like if you're doing it as a group, like with like because the 3 hour pace group for that race there had to have been at least 50 people in that group, like
Mm.
all trying to hit 3 hours. And like I mean I think it was great because I was actually able to hang on to that group. I was ahead of it a couple of times and I was behind it, and then it became a smaller pack as we got to like mile 17 or so. And it, like people started dropping like flies. I was one of them, like towards like I think it was like Lemon Drop Hills, kind of where I dropped back a little bit because I knew it was going to happen. But it's one of those things where like it was just such a massive group of people running the same pace as you, doing the exact same thing as you, and it's like, wow, like that's kind of cool, but it's also like it's kind of weird at the same time period because it's like you know that everybody there has a different goal, so
Mm. Yeah. So
yeah,
you got to run your own race, especially when you
yes,
have like pretty aggressive time goals and you're trying to qualify for
yep,
Boston. Like,
yep,
yeah, you kind of got to rely on your own stuff for that
exactly,
race.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But how did that one turn out for you? Did like it seems like you hit the wall like around the same mark a couple times before. Did that happen in this
No,
race or generally you felt
no.
pretty good?
That was that this was the first race I actually had everything, like everything was right. Like my feeling was
Yeah.
good. I probably could have had more electrolytes because I felt my calf cramp up a little bit, but I did have like salt tabs and I took those quite a few times. I actually grabbed an orange for some random person. They're like, "Hey, take some oranges." I'm like, "Okay." Like,
Okay.
like I was like, "What?" Like it's one of those time periods where you feel like you're getting a little delusional anyways, like towards the later
Yeah.
end of the race.
Yeah.
But yeah, like that race, I hit my first sub 3 hour marathon by 4 seconds. It was 2 hours, 59 minutes, and 56 seconds. So 4 seconds right
Awesome.
under. So it was nice. And I got my Boston qualifying time. So I'm just like, oh, thank God. Like that was kind of like done. I'm like, all right, like check that off the box. No, but little did I know I didn't really get into Boston the way I wanted to get into Boston. So there's that.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess let's talk about that. Like what happened from there, cuz you were thinking you were thinking when you finished the race, I've got my time, I'm good to
Mhm,
go, I'm going to apply and I'm going to run this thing. So,
mhm.
yeah, what happened next?
So what ended up happening was for that specific run, well, I had a couple marathons after that. I had Berlin, I did, and I ran that with my wife. And then shortly after that, I ran the the Bucks County Marathon, or it was some kind of like it was something in Pennsylvania.
Mm,
Like it was another marathon. It was just a virtual one for New York City Marathon. But
mm.
before all that happened, I found out that I missed the cutoff for Boston by 25 seconds because the way they worked it is like I needed to get sub 305 in order to get into the marathon, like in order to actually qualify for Boston, which I did. So I qualified for Boston. But since there were so many people that are actually qualifying for it, they had to actually have a cutoff, like a time cutoff. And their
Oh,
time cutoff was it was 5 minutes and 29 seconds. So I missed it by 25 seconds. And I'm like, and when I heard that, I'm like, I think my wife told me about it, like when it actually happened, because I didn't believe it. It was one of those things where I was just like, "There's no way." And then I started kind of thinking, like, what if I would have went faster? What if I went like a second faster on every mile? I was like, could that have helped? But it's just kind of like the luck of the draw. That's pretty much what it was, and it kind of sucked. It definitely like it ate away at me for quite a bit because it's one of those things where like I did it, but then I
yeah.
didn't do it. You know,
Right.
so that kind of was like a bummer. So I definitely missed out on that one. But what ended up happening was I don't want to get too in detail with this because the thing is that I know that's become a hot topic on social media when it comes to influencer bibs and everything like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but I ended up getting in to the Boston Marathon through a specific way. It was on my social media a little while ago, but I ended up getting in, and I did have a qualifying time, so it's not like I didn't really like not belong there.
Right.
But I ended up running the Boston Marathon this past April, and I ended up getting a bib that was not necessarily a BQ bib. But I mean, that's all I'll say about that. But it's just one of those things where
Yeah.
like I had the opportunity to do this, and I took it because I was just like, I feel like I should have been there in the first place, and I feel like I kind of got robbed.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would agree.
But it's one of those things where like at the same time period, I was also training for another race at the same time period to qualify for Boston again, and that's exactly what I did. I qualified again this past February before the Boston Marathon in general. So like if anybody was either question like if I'm fast enough, clearly I am because I did it twice and I did it
Twice.
2 minutes
Exactly.
faster. So
Yeah. So no
yeah,
questions the second time around. You were
yeah,
a full 2 minutes ahead
yep,
of where you needed to be on
hmm
that one.
yeah.
That's
Unless they
awesome.
actually like, unless the time cutoff is a lot more than what I think it is, like because because Boston the BAA kept the same qualifying standards they did last year. They did the same thing for 2025. So technically, I'm under the qualifying time by like I think it's like 7 minutes and like 38 seconds. That's what I'm under. So
Mm.
in the event they have this crazy cutoff where it's like over 7.5 minutes, which is possible, I would technically be. I'm not going to run it again. It's one of those races where like I feel like it's important to actually share it with someone else. I think that like I got into it. I'm like it was a great experience. Don't get me wrong. It was really cool. The whole weekend is amazing. But I feel like I know how hard it is to get into that race, and it's one of those things where I know that there are other runners like trying to get into this race for the very first time. It's like, why would I want to be one of those runners to take it away from someone else by doing it a
Yeah.
second time? And like, yeah, I would like to have redemption because the race didn't necessarily go the way I wanted it to, but that, I ran it and I completed it. Maybe I'll come back in like 10 years and run it again. I don't know. It's kind
Yeah.
of up in the air. Like I have other world majors to chase, before I do another one or do one that I've done before, like do that
Yeah.
again.
Sure.
So and plus they're also like fairly expensive. So it's like, all right,
Yeah.
well I could spend like a couple $1,000s going to Boston, or I can spend a couple $1,000s and go to London or go to Tokyo or what, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I kind of have to weigh my options when it comes to that and see which one I can get into next. So
Yeah. Is that the goal, is to get the all six world majors? Is that what you're shooting for right now?
yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, like I
Yeah.
honestly feel like it's one of those things where like I wanted to do it a while ago. Ever since Chicago, I was like, oh, I got one. I was like, I didn't know I could do that. I was like, let's just shoot for the other ones.
Yeah.
But like, I don't. I feel like since a lot of it has been turned into like a business kind of aspect, where I feel like they just want your money. They want, like, you know what I mean? Like, I think that kind of
Yeah.
takes away from the actual marathons itself. Like, they're big races. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of other like local smaller races that are actually like a lot cooler. Even there's ones that are like in other states that are really cool too. So I'm like, do I really want to be involved in like the lottery system and trying to qualify and like hope to get in? Like, I don't know. It's one of those things where I'm like, I don't know if I necessarily want to continue doing that. But also at the same time, figuring I'm at 3 right now. I have New York coming up this fall. That's number 4. Then I'll only
Mhm.
have 2 more left. Well, possibly 3. So it's like, well, maybe I should just finish it out and see what happens. I mean, it might take a little
Yeah.
while. It may not. I don't know. But I do know that like if I do complete them, that's a big deal. Um, and I'm not trying to say that like I need to have them done like within the next 5 years. I mean, I would like to, but like
Yeah.
if it happens, it happens. Again, like I said, like they cost money, so
Yeah, they cost money. It's like the
yeah,
logistical of the whole
yep,
thing. Even once you get in, you have to figure out how you're going to even get over there. And
hmm
yeah, it's a whole
hmm
thing. Like, yeah, I think you said it's like a business now, which is pretty crazy.
yeah,
But sounds like if the cards align for you, that you'll knock it out, but you're not maybe putting your whole life on hold to
no,
run these
no,
6 races. Yeah.
no. I mean, if anything, it would be like, oh, I'm gonna make a vacation out of it. It's like, okay, well,
Yeah.
I'm gonna go on vacation. Let's go to London, and then like there just happens to be a race that same weekend. Boom, done.
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect. Just a casual
yeah,
marathon in the middle
yeah,
of your
yeah.
your vacation. No big deal. um,
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
so which ones do you have left? I'm just curious. So London and you're running New York. What's the third
So
one?
I have Tokyo.
Oh, okay,
So
cool.
London and Tokyo. So I think Tokyo will probably be that one will probably be the hardest one. Because I know a lot of people they find it difficult to get in there. So I might have to do that one through like either a charity or a tour group maybe.
Mm,
And London the same way. It's just like one of those things where I'm like, like London's always been hard to get into. Same thing. Well, New York's getting harder to get into also, but like London's always been one that's like difficult for a lot of people who live in the US to get into. I feel like out of everybody that runs the London Marathon, there's like 3 Americans that get in via lottery.
yeah. Well, especially this year, did they hit like a record number of
Mhm.
applicants for the lottery this year? So it's just gonna keep getting harder and
Yeah,
harder, which
yeah.
is gonna make things interesting. But
Exactly, yeah.
I guess it's a good thing we have charity options and things like that to make it
Exactly.
happen.
Yep, yep, yep. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm curious about your Boston experience. You said that, this is kind of what your running career was leading up to, and
Mhm.
and then you said the race, maybe didn't go the way that you expected it to. So, if you don't mind, maybe walking through the Boston experience a
Sure.
little bit.
Yeah, no. So being my first Boston, I had expectations going into the race. It was one of those things where I feel like I probably I don't want to say like I don't know the best way to actually say it. It's one of those things where I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to enjoy this for what it is. It's just a Boston Marathon. I'm going to run it for fun. I don't want to race it. I just want to complete the race, which is what I did. But I did have other goals that were in mind that I was like, okay, well, it'd be really cool if I could do another sub 3, but I'm like, it's a difficult course. I'm like, eh. Then I was like, all right, well, if I run it, maybe I'll try to like get under the time goal again, which is 3:05. I was like, okay, that's my next goal. And I was like, then after that, I'm like, well, I just want to finish. So I'm like, if I hit any of
Mm,
those goals, I'll be great. And this specific race, well, this past April, it was like ridiculously hot out. I think it was like, I want to say it was like in the 60s when we actually first started, or at
wow.
least close to that. So it was significantly hot out. And as soon as the race started, like Boston's course is a net downhill course. There are the Newton Hills that are toward the back end, which they hurt. But for the most part, it's a downhill course. And the first like 1,200 meters, like it's like legit, just downhill. Um, which can really like wreak havoc on your quads. But after like a little bit, maybe after like 4 or 5 miles or so, I started getting a little warm, and I kind of like tossed a lot of my like goals out the window because I'm just like, is it really worth it to push here? Is it worth it to actually do this? And it's like, I don't know if I'm ready because I was coming off of another marathon in February. Then I just turned around and did Boston right after that. So I'm like, it
Mm,
didn't really have enough time to actually really fully recover in order in order to race another one.
yeah.
So I backed off my sub 3, and I was like, okay, well, let me at least try to get a Boston qualifying time. And I was I think I was on track to do that. And then, like I said, the heat just kind of got to me. And plus, on that course, I don't think there's no real shaded areas. I think it's like you're getting beaten down by the sun because when
Yeah.
I started, it was like 10 a.m. or at least around there. They don't do like the races at like 7 a.m. or anything like that. You wait a little bit. So that was something that was different to me because I've never run a marathon at 10 in the morning before. Like,
Yeah, a little
never
strange.
done that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
Um,
on a Monday too, right? It's
yeah,
like on a, yeah,
yeah,
random.
yeah. So I wasn't really used to that at all. So not that I'm making any excuses, just one of those things where I'm like, I didn't really train for that because this past winter it was cold and we were expecting a cooler race. I would have been okay with it. It was like rain. I'm like, well, I've done this before, but like going from a cold race to something that's like extremely hot, I'm like, I didn't even have time to actually acclimate to the heat like at all.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think that definitely took its toll. And then mile 23, I ended up I ended up falling, and it ended up being a runner happened to pass by me. I don't know who it was. I'm not sure, but they ended up tripping me like by cutting in front of me a little bit, and I
Mm.
like kind of tripped and stumbled and like I slid across the pavement for a little bit. And it's one of those moments where like I heard the whole crowd. They're like, "Ooh," and I'm like,
Oh,
"Oh man!" I'm like, "I hope nobody got
yeah.
a video of that." I mean, they probably did. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I felt in that. I think at that point, that's when I was like mentally broken because I was just
Mm.
like, I just want to finish this race because like it's one of those things where like, if something like that happens, you're just like, oh, why am I out here?
Yeah. It just stops you in your tracks.
hmm
Like you're
hmm
like, oh, okay. That
Yeah, and it
humbled
was
me a
that
little
late. I
bit.
mean, if it happened at mile like 3, I'd be like, okay, whatever, it's not a big deal. But it was like mile 23, and I'm like, I've got nothing left.
Yeah. I mean, even just
um,
getting up off the ground, like when
mhm.
you're at mile, anything after 20 is like
Yeah, yeah,
brutal.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, so I finished the race. Like I said, I mean, like that probably I feel like that race, I felt pretty good too. I fueled really well. I had my electrolytes. I had no calf issues. Didn't have any other problems with anything like that. It was just it was just really warm race. Everything else kind of like just clicked, which was really good because like I guess you don't really expect that to happen during a specific race, especially during Boston. But it's one of those scenarios where I was just like, well, like I finished the race. I didn't feel destroyed, minus like I had like some scrapes on my hands, and I think when I landed, I didn't land like with my face forward. My body somehow knew to turn my head to the side. So
Mm.
I hit my chin against the ground, and I'm like, thank God, I didn't go face forward because it would have hit my jaw, and I don't know what
Oof.
would have
Yeah.
happened there. So I'm like, all right, that's cool. But yeah, I mean, like I finished the race. I didn't feel like I was destroyed. It's one of those things where I'm like, all right, well, like I think I did a pretty good job, and I'm proud of the time that I got. I got 3:10:28 for that
That's
race.
great. Yeah.
So I didn't get sub 3. I didn't get 305 sub 305, which again, like I don't really care too much about that. I finished the race. I'm just proud of myself from actually crossing the finish line. I mean, that's one of the things, and that's one of the things I wanted to do. Always wanted to actually run Boston Marathon since I was a kid, and so like it's one of those things where like I originally thought that like you just walked up and just ran the Boston Marathon, but you don't do that.
Yeah. That
um, but yeah, so
that's cool that you had that dream as a kid though. Like
yeah,
it had to feel good crossing the finish line and being
yeah,
like, this is something that I've been thinking about for a large portion of my life, and you finally were able to make it
yep,
happen. That had to be a cool feeling.
yeah, yeah. It's something that like I'll never forget that. And like I said, the experience too. Like it's just something that like it will always live rent free.
Totally.
um, but it's one of those things where like it was a cool experience. I wouldn't change a thing. I mean, other than tripping, I wouldn't change a thing. But even then, like, I mean, it happened. It's it is what it is. But yeah, I mean, like I always remember that, and like if I go back again, it won't necessarily be the same experience because the thing is that I pretty much equate the last little bit of Boston Marathon like making that turn on the Boylston. I think that like that portion right there is pretty much the equivalent of running your very first marathon, like being so proud of yourself for doing something. Like
Yeah.
everything kind of gets bottled up and you just like let it all out that specific time period because you have people like cheering you on throughout the whole time period. And that's just something that's like super electric. And I feel like if I do it multiple times, if I run Boston multiple times, I won't experience that first time ever again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I could do it again. I'll know what to expect. I know exactly like how certain people react to certain thing, whatever, like, that kind of thing. But like, you can't relive that experience again doing it for the very first time. So I'm like, well, what I want to take that away from someone else trying to go for their first time if I do it again the second year in a row? Like, no, like
Yeah.
absolutely not. So again, like I said, I might do it again like 10 years, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, run it back one more time. But
Yeah,
I
yeah.
like that you have that mindset about taking it away from people because it is so exclusive of a race to get
Hmm.
into.
Yeah.
And now that you're a coach, like, do you have any athletes right now that are looking to Boston qualify that you've been able to help, like, given your
Um,
experience, or not quite?
I don't have any right now. I had one prior,
Mhm.
and I feel like that one they were it worked out really well for them. Um, I think I think they qualified by like I think it was like 10 minutes or so, which was really
Wow.
nice. That was really cool. But it's just one of those things where I'm like, that's great. Like, it was also like it was also like their third time getting in. They just wanted to qualify again, and like, okay, well, I'm here to help you out. Whatever. They knew exactly
Yeah.
what to do, so I'm like, that's great. Um, but yeah, it's one of those things where like I just feel like it's nice to people. It's nice to help people reach their specific goals, and trying to get into the Boston Marathon. That's like that's like top level. But again, like at the same time period, like I feel like Boston is more of an elitist kind of a sport, kind of like a
Mhm.
race, and I hate that. That's why I don't say that. I don't throw that word around a lot. I just think it's one of those scenarios where since everybody always seems to put it like, this is the best race, you have to be fast in order to run it. You have to do that. I'm like that. That's one of those cases where I feel like it starts to be damaging to the running community, if you know what I mean.
Sure. Totally.
Like that kind of mindset, like, oh, you can only be fast to run this race. I totally understand. Like they want it to be the best of the best running this race. I totally get it. But at the same time period, I'm like, there are people out there who will never qualify for a Boston Marathon, like ever. And like I feel for them because I was always under the impression that I would never do it. But I would never say like, never say never. But like it's one of those things where I'm just like, people just don't want to do it because it seems like an elitist sport or elitist race. And I think it's just like it really I feel like it sets the tone for certain races. It's like that's not good. I mean, that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to say that like it's bad or anything. Like it's a great experience. Like I said, like there's nothing. I would never say like there's anything bad about the BAA or like about Boston in
Sure.
general. It's just like I think it's just that kind of like that aura, like what like around like
Yeah.
like around Boston. It's just like, oh, you have to be fast in order to run this. I'm like, do you like?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
then you have to pay like X amount of dollars to be into charity. So it's like,
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I think everybody can agree that, running should be for everybody. So
Mhm.
anytime that there's something out there, an organization out there, a race out there that's kind of like deterring people from starting their journey or continuing on their journey, it is a little disheartening because
Yep.
it takes a lot to get started. So
Mhm.
you kind of need all the representation and all the support that you can get in the beginning. So
Exactly. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I think that that's why it's just a little disheartening sometimes
Yeah.
on that side.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I feel like it's like I know, like when I first started running, I always thought it was a thing where it's like, well, no, you have to run every time. You constantly have to run. Like walking is not allowed. Like I was one of those people that was like always like that because when I was in high school, we were always running, like no matter
Yeah.
what. And I just was under the mindset where you always had to run and like walking is not a thing. And as I started getting older, I started to realize that like people can still achieve amazing things if they run and walk. They're building better versions of themselves. So I'm like, why would I want to take that away from anybody? Why would I want to shame anybody for walking or whatever it is? I'm like, no, like that's not me. So
Yeah.
like my whole mindset shifted like several years ago into this whole thing where I'm just like, running should be for everybody. If you're willing to do it, you're willing to put in the work. I don't care. Like, I don't care if you run a 4 minute mile or like a 15-minute mile. I don't care. Like you're a runner through and through. Like I like that. Like that's the kind of thing that I want to actually put into people's minds because it's like there are some like bad apples out there saying like like people who run and walk they're not real runners. I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure you are. You just have a different expectation of it. Like I mean, like
Exactly.
and when you think about ultra running, it's like pretty much just power hiking. That's like walking. So it's like
Yeah.
I mean, something like really like so like that. I can kind of go off on a tangent with that, but it's one of those things where like I feel like running should be for everybody. It doesn't matter if you walk, run, like run, walk. It really should be for anybody. And having that specific mindset of like thinking you should only be running and you only should be fast, I think that kind of stems from specific races that call for specific time periods, like or time
Yeah.
goals or whatever it is. I think it kind of stems from that. And I think that attitude to have is not necessarily the best attitude to have in general when it comes to the running community. I feel like most of us like maybe like 95% of the running community is okay with it, but you have that like 5% that's just like,
Yeah. And they're loud too.
yeah,
You
yeah,
you hear
yeah.
them.
So like, it's just I always frown upon that. I would never say anything bad about anybody or about anything when it comes to that, but I just have this like me internally. It's just one of those things where I'm like I can't stand when somebody says that like, oh, you're not like a real runner because you run walk or you walk or like who what are you, like the running police, like, you know what I mean, like yeah,
Yeah.
it's like the same thing as like somebody saying like, oh, you shouldn't be wearing like a vest, like a hydration vest when you're running 3 miles. It's like,
Yep.
listen, I'll wear my running vest whenever I want to. Like, I don't care. Like, I need to stay
Yeah.
hydrated. I'm pretty sure everybody likes to do that too. So, like, again, where are the running police? Like, I don't know where they are. So, yeah, it's just, this is one of those things where I think that people just need to calm down a little bit.
A little bit. I think that's a great way to end that, is that everybody just needs to chill
Yeah,
for a
yeah.
second. Like, running is running, 26 miles is 26 miles. Doesn't matter how you get there.
Yep.
That you belong here and you're allowed to be a runner if you
Exactly.
can,
Yeah.
if you're on the course. So no, I think that's great. I think that's all great.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now I'm curious, like, this is a great mindset for somebody like yourself to have as a coach and to kind of like pass on to your athletes as well. So how is this run walk mindset, like how do you translate that into what you present to your athletes as well?
Well, I mean, that's something I actually say like right off the bat. I mean, like when I have that first call with an athlete, that's one of the first things I say. I'm like, it doesn't matter. Like, I'm not here to shame you. I'm not here to say like, I'm here to help you succeed and build a better version of yourself. You came
Yeah.
to me for a reason, and I'm like, I'm here to help you. I'm here to guide you. I'm here to tell you like, hey, listen, like, it's probably not a good idea to do this. We can do it, but you have to do this instead, or we can
Mm,
do that, or this will be the result. Like, I am not going to be running the race for these people. Like, you know what I mean? I mean, I wish I could, but it's one of those scenarios where I'm like, I'm here to help you reach your goals. That's my job. I'm here to take the pressure off of you. The only thing you have to do is get from point A to point B. It doesn't matter how fast you do it. It doesn't matter how slow you do it. Like, as long as you're doing it and you feel good about yourself while you're doing it, like that means the world to me. Like, that's one of the things that like I'm very like I take pride in that, and I'm very passionate about running. And it's one of those things where like if you're not passionate about something, then I feel like there's that if you have like small inkling of like, I don't know, this person may be a bad seed. It's just like, yeah, I think I gotta help everybody out, like that's pretty much where I'm at. Like,
yeah.
I don't know, it's one of those things where I definitely feel like when I tell like my athletes just in general, like, hey, listen, like, okay, you run like a 10-minute mile. I'm like, all right, like you're still putting one foot in front of the other, right? Like that's, like someone's like, oh, well, how do I get faster? I'm like, well, it takes time, takes consistency. You got to be patient. Like, you can't just do it right off the bat or that'll cause injuries. Like, so as long as I have all that stuff to kind of back it up and actually say, like, not necessarily prove to anybody, but it's one of those things where I'm like, well, like, if you follow these specific things, we can get you to where you want to be. But like having that realization that like some people just might not necessarily want to get any faster, I think that's totally fine. Like, there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that at all. Like, I fully support any kind of movement in the forward direction. So
Yeah.
doesn't matter how fast or slow.
100%. Yep. As
Yeah.
long as you're outside and moving, you're doing it right, for
Yeah,
sure.
exactly. Yep.
Well, cool. Well, so then I guess if you could offer some advice to somebody who's maybe like getting started on their running journey, what sort of advice would you offer somebody like that?
Ooh, man. Well, it's like take your pick. I think the biggest thing is that I would say just you're stronger than you think. It's one of like I feel like if you think you can do something, then go out and do it. And if you are ever in doubt, you can always talk to people too at the same time period. But it's you versus you. It's not you versus like your opponent or whatever it is. It's one of those like you have to believe in yourself in order to get to where you want to be. And like it's you versus you. It's not against anybody else. You do whatever you want to do. You want to run 10-minute mile, 6-minute mile. You do you. It doesn't matter how long it takes you to get there. So
Yeah, I love that. No,
yeah,
that's great.
yeah.
Um, well, cool. So there's a couple other questions that I like to kind of ask towards the
Sure.
end, just to kind of collect some data. I know when I was a newer runner, I didn't even know what options were out there for the most part, and I always give a disclaimer that fuel, shoes, all of the things that we're about to talk about are your journey, your individual decision. Go get your feet measured. Do a lot of trial and error in the beginning to find out what works best for you. But for you, and I'm especially curious because you said that you're more plant based. Like, what have you liked and what's worked for you for fuel?
So well, I really was on board for Spring Energy for a while, because I used
We know what happened to them.
the awesome sauce. So I'm like, all
Yep.
right, this is great. So I've used that for I think 3 of my past marathons, I think, which has worked really well. But then I'm also just like, they definitely they're missing the mark a little bit. So I'm like,
Yeah.
that's not good. But I was also pairing that because I only use the awesome sauce because I think that's one of the ones I actually really did enjoy having. I usually paired that with there's like some science and sport ones. I did use Huma for quite a bit, and I feel like most gels are plant based. Most of them are,
Yeah.
which is actually really good. So I can choose a lot of things from there. But I've been really digging like Scratch.
Mm.
That's one of the ones I'm just like their stuff's like good. Like I use their liquid carbs like quite a bit, and their stuff most of their stuff is vegan also. I think they may only have I think they have like 2 things that are not necessarily vegan or plant based, and it's like one's like a rice cake, and then one's like might be like a post run drink or something like that. But they have vegan options, so it's not like it's
Mm.
that there's anything that's missing at all. So that's kind of good. But again, like they're like I used their mix this morning on my run, and like I think a full serving, which I've tried before, but I didn't need to use it today. A full serving for their liquid carb mix, I think it's like I want to say it's like 100 grams of carbs for a liquid mix, and I'm like, whoa, like that's quite a bit. So I mean,
Yeah,
I
that's a
used
lot.
half the amount, so it just proves that you could actually like dump a bunch of this stuff inside of like a bladder or a handheld water bottle and just carry with you, and you have carbs for like however long you're running for. So
Yeah. That's great. I actually
yeah,
didn't know that it was that high. That's great. I'm gonna have
yeah,
to
yeah, yeah,
look
yeah.
into that
Like
one for sure.
it's their scratch their super high carb mix. That's what it is.
Cool.
But yeah, it's actually like it's one of my favorites. I have 2 different ones. They have a raspberry one and then a lemon lime one. So I kind of like go back and forth between each
Rotate.
one.
Yeah, you don't want to get sick of
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
That was my problem last year. Was that I was rolling with the same flavors for too long, and now I can't even
yeah,
look at
yep,
them.
yep,
It's
yep. But
um,
yeah, I mean, like that's the thing. I mean, like I think it's more trial and error. I'm gonna try some other ones too. I just haven't ordered them yet. I probably should soon because I'm gonna start training for New York soon. But it's one of those things. I'm like, well, I'll get there eventually. And then when it's like too late, I'm like, oh crap! Like I need to buy
gotta
these
order.
now.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Wait till the
Yeah,
last
yeah,
second.
yep, yep, yep.
Uh, well, cool. And then shoes as well. What have you liked for shoes along your journey? Has it changed over time, or you stick to one
Ooh.
brand, or what do you like?
So I guess to back it all the way up to like my first marathon, not to like go too long,
Hmm.
but my very first shoe brand was Asics. I used
Mm.
that for like several years. Then I got into Brooks a little bit. Then I got away from Brooks, and I'm just like it wasn't necessarily my thing. Then I got introduced to I think it was Saucony was next, and I've been using Saucony for quite a bit. And right now, I'm pretty. I have way too many shoes. uh, but yeah, I have Saucony is my racing shoes, like for marathon or half marathon. I have New Balance for long runs and one for long runs and one for like they're both easy style, like one for long easy runs and one for like medium easy runs, I guess.
Hmm.
And then I have another pair of Saucony for same thing, the medium-ish runs. I think I got another pair of Sauconys for it's a Speed 4s. I got one of those for like tempo runs.
Cool.
For like marathon paced miles. Like if I'm doing like 8 miles and in the middle it's like 1 mile warm up, 1 mile cool down, and in the middle it's like marathon pace miles. I'll put the Speed 4s on, and I'm sure they'll be great. This is the first time I'm actually using the Speed 4s, but if they're anything like the Speed 2s, from which I've actually heard they're very close, the Speed 2s were my favorite like tempo shoes. I think I have like 4 pair of those, and they're all like high mileage. I'm like I can't use these anymore.
Sure.
But yeah, so I'm replacing those ones. I have a pair of Pumas also.
Oh, cool.
Those ones I use for like any speed sessions. Like if I go to the track, I have a pair of Pumas for that. I think I think that might be it. So I'm pretty sure I always have like 5 shoes in rotation during a marathon training cycle, and it's not
Yeah.
necessarily not every runner has to be that way. It's just something that I like. I like changing my shoes every so often, and each shoe has a purpose. I'm not going to use my racing shoe for like any track sessions. Like no, just because like they cost way too much, and I'm like, and they
Right.
have a carbon plate in there, so I'm just like, well, I don't need a carbon plate for when I'm training. I need a carbon plate for when I'm actually racing. So I'm like, I don't need that. And then my long easy run shoes, I'm like, well, I'm not going to use them for anything else because I'm just like, I'm logging a lot of miles in these shoes. I'm like, I'd rather just keep them nice and soft for when I do need them. And then the only ones I really go back and forth are the I have the New Balance 1080s and the Saucony Triumphs. I go back and forth on the medium-ish runs on those ones, just because I'm like, I don't know if this is true or not, but like I'm not like a crazy shoe guy, but I was always under the impression that like if you wear a specific shoe, if you don't let it kind of like refresh, I guess, after 24 hours, you're not really doing anything good for your feet. I don't know how
Mm,
true that is. I have no idea. I don't know. I just said like, so I just swap back and forth. And plus, like, I think putting your feet in different types of shoes helps just in general with your body just kind of like constantly changing. So you're not used to the same shoe. Cause like
yeah,
when one shoe changes or upgrades, your shoes, like your feet are going to act differently anyways. So I'm just like, well, why not
right.
just do it with another brand? And plus it also like, it gives me more miles on those shoes, like I love the 1080s right now. Like they're great. I want to buy another pair right now, but I'm like, I don't need another pair just yet. But like it's one of those things where like I kind of like having the options to have different types of shoes because like I said, they all have a different purpose.
For sure.
To me they do.
Yeah, no, and
Yeah.
I've heard that too about changing your shoes up so that your like ankles and your feet don't get weak, basically, or like
Hmm.
depend on the shoe too much.
Hmm.
But for rotating, so that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you've also been running 8 marathons, so if anyone's listening and you're training for your first, you probably don't need all these shoes, but
Yeah. Yeah. I think 3 is good. I think if someone's running their first marathon, I think 2 or 3 are good.
yeah,
You need a pair that's like a daily trainer. You need one that's good for race day, and you need one that's like for speed sessions.
yeah,
You could be good. You could probably get
good
away
to
with
go.
2 shoes. You probably could. No,
Yeah,
I just wouldn't use the same shoe over and over again. I wouldn't do that.
yeah, yeah, 100%.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, well, cool. And then what's coming up next for you? I know you said you're training for New York. Is that the next big one on
Yeah.
the calendar right now?
So New York is well. I have a half. There's a Philly half marathon in September. I'm gonna try to shoot for a PR there. If I
Cool.
don't get it, that's fine. It's just an added bonus. And plus where it actually sits in my New York build, it's kind of like at the halfway point. So it's kind of like I get to check in to see exactly how I'm doing in training.
Yeah.
So I guess that's a good sign to do that. And like I said, if I don't get a PR in that one, like that's fine. Like it doesn't matter to me. It's a fun race anyways. And it's a fast course, which is good. But I'm gonna be doing that, and then I'm doing New York, and then I have another. So there's a race that I'm looking forward to in April. No, the spring is some time period. Um, and I don't want to say what it is just yet because it's not 100% confirmed. So, my wife and I are the only ones that really know about it, and my neighbor because I run with him all the time. But it's one of those things where I'm just like, I kind of want to keep that one like close to the chest because it's like, uh, if I don't get in and I say it, then it's just like, oh well, crap, like that's not good. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, they're like, I have a couple of ones that are like that I'm eyeing up for the spring. And I have one big one that I would like to do. But I guess it's not confirmed just yet. So kind of just waiting.
Yeah, leaving us on a cliffhanger here.
Yeah, yeah,
We'll have
yeah,
to have everybody follow along with you so that so we can see the announcement for sure.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I mean, I think either one. I think any of the ones that I'm looking at, they're all going to be fun ones, anyways. I will say that that New York is going to be run for fun. Just because I want to soak everything in. Like I know New York's like a big race, and my wife Jessie, she's doing that one also. So I'm not
Cool.
quite sure if I'm going to run that with her or not, or if I'm going to run it solo. I haven't really decided what I want to do just yet, but I'm going to be training as if I'm going to be training for a marathon to kind of like not necessarily go for it, but just kind of like be able to be comfortable at a
Yeah.
specific pace. And then the one that's going to be in the spring is going to be the next PR attempt. So I talked about it before. Like there's this thing I started up a little while ago. It's called the 252 Project, and it's pretty much me trying to get a 252 in the marathon. So the one in the spring is going to be the time period where I'm going to try to go for 252 or sub 252, or if it just starts with 252, I'm okay with
Yeah.
that.
That's great.
But I mean, if I don't get it, that's fine. Doesn't matter. Like, I'm not really. I like setting these goals for myself because it's one of those things where I think it's nice to actually set like lofty goals or scary goals.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, I mean, like that one's just gonna be what it is. Like, I'll plan for a PR. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's good to continue to have like you said, lofty goals or
Mhm.
goals to shoot for because it keeps things interesting. It constantly gives you something to go for. Otherwise,
Yeah.
it's just running 26 miles over and
Yeah.
over again.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
well, cool. Well, thank you so much for walking through your couple marathon experiences. It
Of
was really
course.
cool to hear kind of how you've progressed over time, what you've learned, what's changed, and some of the advice you gave. So,
Yeah.
no, that was just awesome walking through everything with you.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me. It was a great time.